As your application grows in size, you may encounter situations where one page or one view model needs to know about something that happens in another page or another view model. Let's take a look at a real example. So here in this simple app, on the main page, we've got this button, Target Page. When we click this, we go to a second page, and here we can change the value of this slider. Now, in this application, our main page is interested in the current value of the slider. So as I change this value, the main page should be notified. So if we go back, look, we've got a label here, and it displays the current value of the slider. Now I got a question for you. How would you implement something like this? You've already seen this before. Remember the contact book exercise? We had a similar scenario there. There we had two pages, context page and contact detail page. In contact detail page, if we added a new contact, contact list was notified and it added that contact to its list view. It's the same pattern. We use events to implement something like this. So here's the code behind our main page. In our onClick handler, first we create an instance of the target page. Next, we subscribe to slider value changed event. And here's the name of our event handler method. So when we change the slider value in the target page, this event handler method is called. And this is where we set the text for the label. Now let's take a look at the target page. So here we have a stack layout, a slider, and a label. Pretty simple. We have handled the value changed event of the slider. And here's the name of our event handler. Let's take a look at the code behind. In the code behind, we have declared an event using event handler delegate. And this is the name of our event, slider value changed. Now, when we change the value of the slider, this event handler is called. And at this point, we raise our slider value changed event. So pretty basic. You have worked with something like this before, no magic. But I want to point out something interesting about this implementation. Let's go back to our main page. So here our main page is the subscriber to slider value changed event. And target page is the publisher of this event. Now with this implementation, in order for the main page to handle slider value changed event, it needs a reference to an instance of the publisher. I'm talking about this page object here. So this page object is an instance of the publisher. Now there is nothing wrong here, but sometimes in larger, more complex applications, you may not necessarily have a reference to an instance of the publisher. Now one solution is to bring a reference in, but sometimes this can make your code a little bit complicated or ugly. In Xamarin Forms, we have a simpler mechanism to handle situations like this. Messaging Center. So Messaging Center is a class that is visible everywhere in our application. And think of it like a message bus or an event bus. So as a publisher, I can publish or send a message, and different classes can subscribe to this message. Now, the interesting thing is that these subscribers do not need a reference to an instance of the publisher. Now, let's see how we can use Messaging Center here. So for this demo, let's imagine we don't have a reference to an instance of target page. Even though we have it here, just for a second, imagine it doesn't exist. So this is the line that is tricky. Here we need a reference to an instance of target page. Now we want to replace this with Messaging Center. So let me comment this out. We use Messaging Center dot subscribe. The first parameter here is the subscriber. Now in this case, main page is the subscriber. So I'm going to pass this as the argument here. The second parameter is the message. And this is just a label for the message. We can have different messages in our application, and we identify them by a string. So let's call this slider value changed. Now look at the third parameter. Here we need an action, and this action references a method that will be called when this event is raised. So this is our event handler. Now this subscribe method has two overloads. One that takes an action with two generic parameters, One is sender and the other is arg. The other overload does not have an argument, so it's an action of sender. If you don't want to send any additional data with your event, this is the overload you use. Otherwise, you use the one that takes an action of sender and args. So in this case, I want to know the value of the slider. So I'm going to use this overload. Now here we need an action of sender and args, but we have not specified the type of sender and arguments. So we need to add them as generic parameters to this subscribe method. The sender in this case is target page. We know the type of the sender, but we don't have a reference to an instance of the sender. So target page, and our argument is of type double. That's the value of the slider. Now, here we need an action that takes a target page and a double parameter. We already have this event handler here on slider value changed, but the first parameter here is an object. I can change this to target page, and now it matches the signature for our action. So I can simply add the name of this method on slider value changed here. Note that with this new implementation, we don't have a reference to an instance of the publisher or sender. We just know somewhere in our application there is a type called target page that raises this event. Now we need to go to our target page and use messaging center to publish or send this event. So let's go to target page. This is the event handler for our slider. So instead of working with this event, I'm going to use messaging center. So messaging center dot send. Now the first parameter is the sender. So here I'm going to use this as the argument. The second parameter is the name of the event. So that should be the same string we used here. Slider value changed. And the third parameter is the additional argument we want to send with the event. And for that, we're going to use e.newValue. So with this implementation, we don't need this event here because we're using messaging center, delete. And we don't need this line either. So that's all we had to change, only 2 lines. So this is messaging center. And by the way, we have this other method here, messaging center.unsubscribe. So at some point, if you're not interested in receiving further messages of a given type, you can use unsubscribe. You would use this method in a subscriber. So let's go back to our main page. This is where we're subscribing to this message. Now, at some point later in the future, we might want to unsubscribe. So we can call messaging center.unsubscribe. The first parameter is the subscriber, so this, and the second is the name of the message, slider value changed. Now, in this case, the compiler cannot infer the type of generic parameters, so we need to explicitly specify it here. The generic parameter is the type of subscriber, so main page. And that's how you use the unsubscribe method.